Senator, nice to see you, sir.
Well, nice to see you, Greta.
And I should say, Mr. Chairman, you're now the chairman of the Finance Committee.
Well, that's nice of you to say that. It is. I've been chairman of 2 other major committees, but this is the best of all of them.
I bet it is. Okay, let's talk about the tax code. You and I have spoken many times over the years. What's the plan for the tax code? Are we going to get rid of it and start all over and get one we can all understand or not?
Well, we clearly have to reform the tax code, and it's a big job because, first of all, you've got to bring people together in a way that you can get the job done. But there are so many things that need to be changed that it's just unbelievable, and it's unworkable. It's well, if you put the code together, it would be 7 foot tall. I mean, with the regulations, it's just unbelievable. The American people just don't know what to do with it. Tax preparers, you couldn't get any 2 tax preparers to prepare complicated returns the same way. That's pathetic when you stop and think about it. And we've got to simplify that code and do a number of other things as well. I've got a list of things that I think we ought to do.
Do you prepare your own taxes? 'Cause I can tell you, I don't prepare my own. I can't figure out the tax code, and mine isn't particularly complicated, but do you do your own taxes?
I used to when I was practicing law, but I wouldn't dare do it today because, first of all, I don't have that much, and it really isn't all that complicated, but it's very complicated compared to what it used to be. And you've got so many different facets of the tax code. So I use professional help ever since I've been a senator. I don't want to make any mistakes. I don't want anybody saying that I haven't paid my taxes. And it's just better to do that.
I've asked so many members of the House and the Senate whether they do their own taxes, because to me it's always a bit peculiar. The very people who write the taxes confess to me that they don't understand the tax code.
Oh, yeah.
And so if they don't understand the tax code and they've written it, what about the rest of us?
Well, that's right. We do have to revamp that code. It's very, very difficult. The Democrats want to increase taxes. They want to increase revenue so they can spend more. Republicans want to get it under control. We want to make it so that it doesn't gouge the American people or businesses or anybody else for that matter. We want to make it so it's workable. We also think if we simplify the code and make it more workable, we'd have something that basically would help everybody. For instance, I've said that what I want to do, I have 7 principles for tax reform. You know, they range from growth to fairness to simplicity to permanence to competitiveness to various savings and investment and revenue net neutrality. I mean, these are all goals of mine to try and get the code in such a form that the average person can fill out their own returns and will not feel like they're gouged anymore. And frankly, the code is a doggone mess.
What is your sort of your philosophy or thought about taxes? I mean, some people want a flat tax or a sales tax or just have a progressive tax, and then you've even got Simpson-Bowles, which when Simpson-Bowles, which Republicans and Democrats were equally opposed to it or in favor of it, it seemed like. And what I liked about it is that the 3,300 earmarks that Simpson-Bowles says are in the tax code, they're gone, so that no special deals for people.
Well, they did a bang-up job, is all I can say. On the other hand, what they wanted to sell is very difficult to sell. You ask about a flat tax. It'd be wonderful if we could do a flat tax. But we would not have any help from the Democrats, as far as I can see, unless it increases taxes dramatically. So it's very difficult to go to a flat tax. If I had my way, we would do a tax that basically, or a tax system that basically would be a cash flow system. So if you buy something as a businessman, you can deduct that in the year that you bought it. And make it much more simple, much more workable. And of course, we're going to have to work on getting more and more people by broadening the base who help to pay taxes. Right now, you can make a case that over 50% and really approaching 60% of the American people do not pay any taxes. And a high percentage of them are living off the government. And that's what our more liberal philosophy has done for us in this country. And there's no desire to change that. So we're a long way from having a tax code that really will work for everybody, that will bring in enough revenue to be able to run the government, but also make it more difficult to raise revenue just for every Tom, Dick, and Mary approach to life.
Well, if you have the House and Senate, it's not a divided hill anymore. Aren't you sort of? I mean, you've got the wind behind your back to change the tax code if you want, right? Or is that wrong? I mean,
well, it helps to have Republicans in control. The House can pass just about anything it wants to. For instance, I've met with my counterpart in the House, Paul Ryan, today, who heads the Ways and Means Committee. And even he is very concerned about finding a methodology that will improve our tax situation in this country and bring everybody together, because he knows that he's got plenty of points of view with those 435 members, and take it down to the Republican members in the House. There are differing views on taxation among Republicans as well. In the Senate, in order for us to really get a bill through, it's got to be able to pass the 60-vote threshold. Now, Republicans are 54, and that means we've got to have 6 Democrats who will stand up for a really good tax reform. I hope we can do a tax reform that will get many more than that. On the other hand, it's unlikely if we do the things that really have to be done. That is, bring back spending, bring back the spending of the federal government, get rid of some of the agencies that really are not doing the job, save money here, there, and everywhere really in the federal government, and also have a code that works for the vast majority of people in our society, which the present code does not.
What about the inheritance tax? What's your thought about that?
The inheritance tax?
Yeah, are you in favor of raising it, lowering it, get rid of it, or what?
Well, it's a little premature for me to say where we're going to go on the inheritance tax.
But how do you feel about it?
Personally, I think we ought to get rid of it. I mean, I don't see where that really doesn't produce much revenue, and it really does interfere with the ability to transfer businesses and properties to family members. And in the end, if it doesn't produce enough revenue to really justify it, why do we do it? And we do it because there's a large group of people here in the Congress who want to make sure that the so-called rich pay for everything. And a lot of people, it really doesn't work in I call it the death tax. And, they get very few revenues for all the pain it costs us. And what it does do, let's say you own a small business and it's worth $10 million. You're going to have to sell the business. The remaining family's going to have to sell the business to pay the tax. And that's crazy, as far as I can see.
What can you, as chairman of the Finance Committee, do to help the people who are really down and out, who aren't paying taxes? Probably would love to have jobs so they could pay taxes, but what can the Finance Committee do? What are your powers to do to sort of rev up that part of our economy?
Well, I've been interested in how the president is bragging about how the economy is really going well and so forth, but the average family is $3,000 less than they were before he became president. And this is after 5 years, too, of inflation and all the other problems that make living very costly and very, very difficult for people. I think we've got to find a way of helping the middle class without doing what some of the Democrats want to do, and that is rob other classes to take care of the middle class.
So what can we do? I'm looking for. What's sort of the idea? Because this is what you mentioned. There's a huge wage gap. People are so down now. We've got people leaving the workforce, and that contributes a lot to the fact that our unemployment rate is going down as people are leaving the workforce because they're so discouraged. Families are worried because their kids are home in their basement after going to college, saddled with huge loans. Something, and I don't know if it is within the Finance Committee to have an impact on that, but that's obviously a huge problem for the nation.
What about all the women out there who are single heads of household that don't know what to do, don't know how they're going to pay for their families, and are living on welfare now, or barely getting by, or taking whatever jobs they can get to be able to help augment the family income. And it isn't just women, but it's mostly women, and I think we ought to do something to help here. But I remember testimony before the committee where people are if you know your way around the federal government, and you know your way around the transfer payments, in other words, the welfare to transfer payments, you can accumulate as much as $50,000 a year.
So what are we going to do?
And if you do that, what incentive do you have to go to work for, say, a $60,000 or $75,000 a year job? You're working for with a high marginal tax rate, and that's why a lot of people aren't going to work. They'll never go to work again because they can get by on the government welfare programs well enough that it doesn't justify them going to work.
You think you'd be able to work with President Obama on this, on all these issues?
I'd sure love to. I mean, I haven't seen any real, if he would come up with, and his people, if President Obama and his people will come up with reasonably responsible and effectively thought out tax approaches that would change our tax code into a better code, gosh, I'm here. I'd work with them. I'd do everything I possibly could to try and get things going. But every time I talk to Democrats, and especially the White House, they're talking about more revenue so they can spend more. And let's just be honest about it. When you have over 40 job training programs, you've got hundreds of programs that all aim to try and do the same thing. We're not helping NIH, the National Institutes of Health, like we should, and we've got overlapping programs after programs after programs without all this being thought out. You can see why we're in a mess. You can see why they want to keep throwing money at these things when, in fact, we could reform all of these things and save a lot of money in the process and do a better job of helping the people who are in need than we're doing today. We've built such a big federal bureaucracy here, it's just unbelievable. Then add the IRS to it. I mean, you saw what we were getting into last year with some of the IRS difficulties and some of the people at the IRS who were playing politics with their jobs. You've got an IRS that is unionized. Well, what is the justification for having a union in the IRS? That's naturally an interest in more and more spending and more government. If there's one agency it shouldn't have a union, should not have a union, it would be the IRS. I mean, I could go on things that are wrong. What I'd like to do is get on to things that are right, and the best thing we can do are do those 7 or 8 things that I've been talking about that are goals of mine. And fortunately, we do have some really good people on the Finance Committee who want to work together. Take Chairman Wyden. He was the chairman over the last number of years. My chairman, I was his ranking member. He'll be my ranking member. But we've gotten along pretty well together. We've really tried to work together. We've really tried to bring both sides together. I've really looked at his concerns. He's looked at my concerns. We don't necessarily control the Senate in doing what's right, but I think if we can keep working together, we can solve a lot of problems that would not otherwise be solved.
What's your level of optimism that we'll have a new, refined, streamlined tax code that everyone can understand in the next 2 years?
You know how to ask really difficult questions, is all I can say.
No, but I just feel fundamentally, to me, it's just so bizarre
it's the question.
That this tax code, if you can't do your own taxes here on Capitol Hill, if the members of the House and the Senate can't, I can't, well, maybe there's something wrong with the tax code.
You think there might be something wrong?
I think that's a good tip.
Greta, you do a terrific job. Your legal background and all of the experience that you've had, you ask them as many intelligent questions as anybody who's ever interviewed me. Let's face it, it's too complex, it's too difficult, but we've got to find a way of working together, Republicans and Democrats, to come up with a better way of doing this. Remember, the last time the Internal Revenue Code was reformed was back in 1986, and it took 3 years to get there. Now, if anything, the code is more complex and more difficult today, but we don't have 3 years. We have perhaps a year in this administration, and we'll just have to see if we can get this done. It's going to take some cooperation by both sides. It's going to take a bipartisan approach of both sides. It's going to take a lot of intelligent work. We've got some of the best staff that have ever served on Capitol Hill who understand these issues beautifully and would like nothing better than to come up with a code that both sides could support and that would quit gouging the American people the way the current code does. There is the dual philosophy here where Democrats believe federal government is the answer to almost everything, and Republicans believe that the states run things better than the federal government does, and that we have allowed the federal government to become such a huge albatross to all of us that hanging around our necks that It's affecting everything we do in this country, including everything we do in the respective states.
One last question. Do you have any oversight authority over the IRS? And if so,
Oh, yeah.
oh, so you do. So do you expect to have hearings on the IRS? Should the IRS look to be cleaned up?
Well, when Chairman Baucus was chairman of the committee, I was his ranking member, and we held some 30 hearings on the IRS. And also, we're continuing our investigation of the 501c3, 4, and 5s, and some of the problems that went on that were politicized problems at the IRS. One reason we haven't completed is because they keep finding more and more emails of some of these employees of the IRS that are in question here. And hopefully we'll finish that investigation soon. A second problem why it's difficult to disclose all this stuff is because under Section 6103, these are materials that you really can't disclose except under certain circumstances. And we're going to have to find a way of finding those special circumstances that would allow us to disclose really what really went on with this IRS scandal, or scandals that have happened over a number of years and seem to have been pretty one-sided.
So do you smell a rat?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I'd have to be pretty stupid not to smell a rat in this situation. Some of it is just incompetence. Some of it is partisanship. Some of it is, just incompetence. And there are many serious and sincere people who work at the IRS. I think they have one of the better commissioners there right now in Koskinen. On the other hand, my viewpoint may not be shared by the House. But to make a long story short, we've got to bring these things to fruition and then, of course, find a way of making them known to the public so that the public can determine for itself, or people can determine for themselves, what to do about all this stuff. But what happened there should never have happened. And these are the type of things that we need to get to the bottom of, but it's really, really difficult to do.
Senator, thank you, sir.
Nice to be with you.